just informed, Vice Minister Orazbek will join us later. So I would suggest we go in the order designated in the conference program. So we have 4 presenters. Once again, I'll be introducing you and giving heads up when on time. Just for the optimal time management, we aim at about 15 minutes per presentation. We perhaps will collect questions at the end, although we'll see how this goes, but I aim to open the floor for questions at the end. So without further ado, once again, welcome to the session 8. And it gives me a great pleasure and honor to give the floor to Vice Dean for Academic Affairs of Graduate School of Public Policy, Professor Colin Knox, with his topic on the performance of authoritarian bureaucracies, co-authored with former colleague of ours, Saltanat Janenova of the University of Bristol currently. Professor Knox, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Aziz. Are people seeing my screen?
Yes, all good.
Yes, Professor.
Yep, great, thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This afternoon, I want to make a short presentation on the topic of the performance of bureaucracies in authoritarian states. And this is a paper with my former colleague, Saltanat Janenova, who's now in the University of Bristol. So the focus of the research is whether bureaucracies perform differently within similar political contexts. And the similar political context in this case is authoritarianism. And I'll be using Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan as case studies. The way the presentation and research is ordered is that we examine 3 factors derived from the literature in terms of performance of bureaucracy. First factor is how bureaucracies in authoritarian states provide public services, the professionalism of the civil service, and the policy capacity of officials within those administrations. So I suppose the key kind of research question that we're asking here is, how do bureaucracies perform in consolidated authoritarian regimes? In particular, we're interested in the kind of dynamic, if you like, between political autocrats and career officials and whether that results in less effective government. So given the nature of these states, there tends to be very much a top-down orientation with strong political leads, and whether that impacts on the nature of the politics administrative divide. Importantly, when we're looking at performance, measuring performance, we need to obviously think of ways in which we will be able to do that. So I'm getting a little bit of interference on my screen, but I hope you can still see it. So the measure that we use for looking at performance of bureaucracy here is the well-known worldwide governance indicator called government effectiveness. And that indicator attempts to capture 3 facets, 3 elements. One is the quality of public services. The second is the capacity of the civil service and its independence from political pressures. And the third one is the quality of policy formulation. And in fact, the substance of our research tries to follow that typology fairly closely, although the last one is more difficult to track, the quality of policy formulation. So the case studies that we select are from Central Asia, and these are data which are compiled from the most recent Freedom House and worldwide governance indicators in terms of 2 variables that are most important to us here. The first is democracy, and the second one is government effectiveness. So you will see, looking at the 5 Central Asian states here, Kyrgyzstan on a percentage basis is by far the most democratic of the 5 countries, although we had a very interesting presentation yesterday from Dr. Takalo, who probably would argue against these kind of stats. But in terms of Freedom House, Kyrgyzstan, amongst the 5 Central Asian countries, is the most democratic, followed by Kazakhstan, followed by Uzbekistan, then Tajikistan, and probably not too surprisingly, Turkmenistan. So we have selected Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan as our 2 case studies here. So what does the existing research tell us about bureaucracies in general, and then specifically in, if I can use this phrase, despite my colleagues' opposition to it, post-Soviet states? So a strong element of research tells us that efficient bureaucracies are critically important to economic growth and the performance of developing states. That's well established in the literature, and one of the reasons why we think this research is interesting. Another element, a strand of research, is that the performance of bureaucracies is contingent on the political and administrative context in which officials operate, that this kind of global one-size-fits-all model doesn't apply, particularly to authoritarian states. And the third strand of literature that we draw on here is from Guy Peters' work, which is that bureaucratic performance is highly dependent on the policy capacity of civil servants. So a recent piece of research, and I'm sorry, I don't know if Dr. Lodi's listening, but Musa Gulova, a Kazakhstani researcher in Singapore, actually uses this phrase in her research: bureaucratic performance in post-Soviet states. And she draws out 4 interesting distinctions between Soviet bureaucracies and the traditional Weberian model of public administration. And she says that in Soviet bureaucracies, there's a lack of distinction between politics and administration. Bureaucrats are servants of the ruling party rather than citizens. So if you like, accountability is upwards to the political party, political elites, rather than downwards to citizens. Promotion at the senior levels of the civil service is often conditional on party membership. There's a lack of commitment to rules and procedures over the pursuit of political goals, and semi-legal or illegal corrupt activities are often overlooked by bureaucrats. She makes those 4 distinctions, which I think are important in terms of what we're about to look at in our research. So just to summarize that introductory element, we're looking at political context, and our argument here in post-Soviet states, our 2 case studies, is that patronage-based autocratic regimes trumps performance and accountability to citizens. So it's upwards rather than downwards accountability. We're looking at the quality of government measured by public services and professionalism, and we're looking at policy capacity of officials. So in brief, our 2 case studies, our paper goes into this in a lot more detail, but we chose Kazakhstan because it's the most effective government in the region, as measured by government effectiveness from the worldwide governance indicators. Kazakhstan is sometimes characterized as a soft authoritarian regime which experienced rapid economic liberalization, privatization, and the adoption of a new constitution. Over time, there has been a slowdown in the economy. We've witnessed fluctuating oil prices, and rising poverty has exposed some problems. So if you like, there has been a breakdown to some extent in the social contract between the state and its citizens. The public sector has witnessed pervasive corruption, although that is getting better, a weak rule of law, and limited challenge function from external stakeholders like civil society and the media. So just in the interest of time, I have to go over these fairly quickly. Kyrgyzstan was chosen because of its relatively high democratic credentials, sometimes referred to as being an island of democracy. Post-independence, it moved to establish a market economy. It claimed a commitment to pluralism and a growth of civil society. It witnessed thereafter, after independence, long periods of instability, the so-called Tulip Revolution in 2005, a subsequent revolution in 2010, and then the disputed presidential elections in 2020. So it's been oscillating between a parliamentary form of government, and presidentialism. And the most recent election of President Japarov in 2021 signaled a strong return to strong presidentialism. So if we look at Kazakhstan vis-a-vis Kyrgyzstan, just in terms of government effectiveness, you will see that Kazakhstan over a period of since 1996 onwards has witnessed a significant increase in government effectiveness. And I was just looking at some data on 2021, not from this index since it's not out yet, but there's been a sharp decline across many countries in government effectiveness as a result of COVID. But Kazakhstan has done well as measured by this index. Kyrgyzstan, on the other hand, has lagged behind, and the data would suggest is much less effective as measured by this index. Again, I have to do this fairly quickly, but specifically in looking at public services, we know that Kazakhstan has been a success story in terms of e-government as measured by the e-government index. I think it's now something like 29th out of 193 countries. It has over 500 public services which are accessible online. And it's been described in one of the OECD reports as improvements in public services are progressive and professional. Of course, e-government is not the only measure of public services, but I think it's an important dipstick, if you like, into improvements that are happening. If we look at Kyrgyzstan, on the other hand, it's ranked 83 from 193 countries, and the most recent Bertelsmann Transformation Index has a nice little quote about Kyrgyzstan. It says the quality of public services in Kyrgyzstan and the capacity of the system to evenly function at all times and across the country are not strong. Corruption, inefficiency, lack of resources, incompetency in the bureaucracy are some of the systematic hurdles to improving public administration. So relative to Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan is seen to deliver relatively poor public services. I just want to look at another measurement here by way of kind of triangulation, which compares and contrasts Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan bureaucracies. And these data are taken from the Quality of Government Survey, the latest one, 2020. It's specifically the fragile states data. And they look at various facets of bureaucratic performance. So the first one here is patronage. So you will see that in this graph, Kyrgyzstan has a much more patronage-based system. Kazakhstan, of course, has as well, but to a lesser extent. The appointments in terms of merit-based appointments, meritocracy, Kazakhstan scores again better than Kyrgyzstan. In terms of security of tenure, Kazakhstan again scores better than Kyrgyzstan. In terms of political interference, both countries are seen to have a level of political interference, but Kazakhstan less so. In terms of impartiality, neither of them score well, but Kazakhstan scores slightly better. In terms of entry at the lowest level, this is just a measurement about whether civil servants can join at the lowest level, and both of them are fairly similar here. Whether they have entrance exams, which is to do with the extent to which there's corruption in terms of entry, whether they have special laws dedicated to the public sector themselves, whether they are closed or not, which means is promotion, recruitment beyond the entry level, closed to outside stakeholders like people from the private sector. And finally, professionalization index gathers a couple of these measures and puts them into an index. So Kyrgyzstan is seen to perform much less well in terms of professionalism than Kazakhstan. So just in summary, Kyrgyzstan has a higher level of patronage appointments. Bureaucratic positions are much less merit-based. It's a much more closed system, less external recruitment. Kazakhstan has a higher security of tenure, higher level of professionalism, although neither country scores particularly well in this composite index. So again, just a little quotation around professionalism in Kyrgyzstan. from the 2021 Bertelsmann report, the bureaucracies of various government departments, especially middle and high-level bureaucrats, while agreeing to public sector reforms, have been a major factor obstructing change, either willfully or due to incompetence. So there's an inbuilt resistance, if you like. Just out of interest, I did this little correlation between the professionalism index and government effectiveness. Not all post-Soviet countries have the data, but from this little correlation, you will see a strong relationship between professionalism and government effectiveness here. 83% of variance in government effectiveness explained by professionalism or associated with professionalism. And finally, the third aspect of our work was to look at policy capacity. So one aspect of policy capacity is how bureaucracies interact with sources of policy advice, such as think tanks, interest groups, political parties, and external actors. In other words, do they have sufficient policy capacity within the civil service, or do they depend on or are influenced by external actors? This is a framework developed by Guy Peters. So he has this typology here, and cell one here says cell one is where both outside actors and bureaucrats have policy capacity and compete for influence, that he titles, this cell he titles competitive broker. Cell two here is where the bureaucracy is relatively unskilled in policy analysis, but there are powerful and effective external stakeholders, hence the bureaucracy is an agent for these players. Cell three here is where bureaucratic organizations have substantial capacity and monopoly, and actors in the external environment do not. And finally, cell four here is where neither the bureaucracy nor the external actors have significant policy capacity. Hence, governing is essentially muddling through. So our analysis on this was that Kazakhstan probably fell into category two, cell two here, where the bureaucracy is relatively unskilled, but that they're influenced by external actors here. And by that, I mean the business sector and the political party. Kyrgyzstan, on the other hand, neither the bureaucracy nor external actors have significant policy capacity. Hence, governing is essentially about muddling through. And this is particularly true here when we look at our kind of preconceptions of Kyrgyzstan, which is said to have strong civil society. In fact, they have relatively limited influence on the policy process. So to conclude, we find that professionalism and the policy capacity of officials impact on the performance of authoritarian bureaucracies. These factors are, however, contingent on political stability rather than the degree of authoritarianism of the regime. Kazakhstan, as judged by the metric government effectiveness, is the highest performing country in the Central Asian region. So although it's much less democratic than Kyrgyzstan, it could be described as, and I'm quoting here, a regional authoritarian gravity center in Central Asia, based on those factors which influence bureaucratic performance. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Colin, for your very thought-provoking presentation. And we will, if you have any questions, do of course save them for the Q&A session, which we'll have at the back. But let me again thank you, Colin, for your presentation. Without further ado, let's move on to our second presenter, Gulmira Sheryazdanova of Second Seifullin Kazakh Agro-Technical University. And the presentation is on the very important, very trendy developments here about the hearing state in Kazakhstan, crisis of political communication, ? That's the title. Gulmira Sheryazdanova, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Topic of my presentation is issue of political communication in the context of a concept of hearing state in Kazakhstan. As you know, concept of hero state was announced by the president Tokayev in 2019. That was aimed at enhancing political communication between representative of civil society and state authority, allowing citizens to be involved in the process of making decisions. As President acknowledged, in Kazakhstan there are crises of political communication. He acknowledged it in his speech and noted that this crisis was caused by the low level of the confidence of citizens in state institutions and low level of public trust in general. That's why it was as a result of this announcement, National Councils of Public Trust was established. As you know, the idea of these councils to develop proposal and recommendation on typical issues of state policy based on the broad discussion with representative of public political parties and civil society. So it's a kind of dialogue between representative of civil society, including NGO, political scientists, political journalists, in order to be involved in the making decision process. It was idea of these councils. However, the formation of this council took place on the initiative from above, on the part of the state, on the principle of cooptation, but not on the principle of self-organization. I think that it's very important in order to understand the nature of this organization. That's why, that's why a lot of critique against this council was in that time. The reason of this critique that these councils replace the function of parliament. Actually, it's evidence of weaknesses of parliament eventually. I think it's kind of very important noted in this case. So, from my perspective, the main reasons for the crisis of political communication consist of two factors. First of all, it's a crisis of political participation. So communication caused by the crisis of communication caused the crisis of political participation, lack of feedback between society and authority, and second, caused by the low level of articulation and aggregation of social interest in politics. So lack of mechanism between social interest and politics. And second one, it's crisis of political participation is rooted in the limitation of electoral system itself. That's why I would like to make some brief overview the history of formation electoral system in Kazakhstan. So formation of electoral system in Kazakhstan related to the amendments to the constitution of Kazakhstan that have been made several times in 1998, in 2007, 2011, 2017, and 2020. 2019. So just shortly, if we shortly overview of these amendments. The first amendments of Constitution was in 1998. The aim of idea of this amendment was focuses on the strengthening that role of party in Kazakhstani political system and creating the competitive environment and political pluralism. As a result, in election in 1999, among 9 parties that participated in the election, actually 4 parties won this election. First of all, majoritarian party of majority party, OTAN party, and 1 deputy from Akjou party, 1 deputy from Asar party, and 1 deputy from ICE electoral bloc that consists of agrarian and civil party in Kazakhstan. Next amendments was in 2007. This amendment intended a complete transition from majoritarian electoral system to proportional electoral system. And as a result, only 1 party won this election. Actually, among 7 political parties that took place in this election, only 1 party overcome the 7% barriers, and this situation led to a paradoxical situation, the formation of one-party parliament, among in the context of existing multi-party system. So among many parties, only 1 party became the dominant, and it led to formation of one inclusive party system. Next one, it's an election in 2012 that, according to this election, 3 main party, as you remember, won this election: at Nur-Otan Party, Akjou Party, and Communist Party of Kazakhstan. You see the percentage. As you see, Nur-Otan Party received about 80%, almost 81% of voters. Akjou Party about 7.5%, and Communist Party of Kazakhstan about 7.90%. Next election was in 2017, and we see the same situation. Only 3 parties won this election: Nur-Otan Party, Party of Majority, Akjou Party, and Communist Party of Communist People's Party of Kazakhstan in election in 2017. The same results in election in 2019 and in election in 2021. The same party, the same situation. As a result, it can lead to the questions: is it election without choices, actually? Because from 1999 till 2021 nothing didn't change, and we had the same political party, the same political situation, no inclusive and no changes, despite of the course of political modernization that was announced by Tokayev Fortunately, now we have the system with one inclusive party of majority and two favorites parties. As I said before, the expectations of political modernization failed from my perspective, because nothing changed in this way. This situation led to some distrust of election result in 2021, because
about 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So it's a kind of evidence of this the difference between official data and non-official data from Central Election Commission and data from independent exit poll. As you see, the numbers are different. And the end of my presentation, I would like to demonstrate the result of expert survey in terms of crisis of political communication. As you see, a lot of experts answered to the question, are there communication crisis between government and society? Yes, very often. And what is the reason of this crisis? 38% respondents noted that crisis of trust and the reluctance of political leadership to solve system errors. Also, about 40% of surveyed experts noted there are no established form of political communication in the country, and the existing ones are on the shy character. And about 35% of respondents noted that close nature of political system when the decision-making process is influenced by pressure group operating within the political system itself. So, as a result of my presentation, I can stress of several consequences from the crisis of political communication. I think it can be several scenarios. One of them is a radicalization of politics in Kazakhstan in case of increasing of economic situation. Second one, it can be brain drain trade among young generation, because young generation could not express their opinion, maybe. And as a recommendation, we need to, of course, we need to create massive middle independent middle class, because without economics and without social infrastructure, we could not change the political infrastructure. And in order to solve this problem, of course, we need to massive political reforms in order to create new effective electoral law, new law on political party, and new law on free political meeting. So thank you for your attention. It's any questions, I would like to answer to these questions.
Yes, the questions now.
Well, ideally, we would probably save them till the Q&A session at the end.
Yeah.
Just right. So yes, Gulnur, thanks very much for your presentation. Very interesting topic, very trendy topic indeed. So perhaps without further ado, let's move on. And I would like to give the floor to our third presenter, Gulnur Makulbayeva of Nazarbayev University, with the topic on institutional performance of the public council in Mangistau region. So looking at sort of more regional context of the civic participation in the western part of the country. Gulmira, you can take off your presentation, perhaps.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, my camera is off today, so but I will share screen. Just a minute. No, she needs to remove it first, yeah?
Right, all good.
Share. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can. If you could make it full screen though,
Screen.
just so we see the better. Maybe reading view it's called.
Much better, yes?
Perfect, perfect. Go ahead.
So good afternoon, dear participants, guests. Let me present my pilot project findings based on Mangistau region this summer in August 2021. So the research question was, what is the impact of culture on institutional performance on the public council in homogeneous Mangistau region, ethnically homogeneous Mangistau region? I interpret the culture as a combination of social capital, trust in government, rules imposed on individuals, and group orientation. So there are scholarly research that argues that ethnic composition is crucial, has an impact on culture. There is a debate whether it negatively affects or positively, so we would like to test it in a local context. Other scholars highlight that culture in its turn affects institutional effectiveness so culture affects institutional performance per se. So I have chosen the public council to test to examine the role of the impact of culture on institution. Public council came into existence in 2016 with a name to monitor public organizations. Its decisions are non-binding. It serves as a bridge between the general public, citizens, NGOs, and state bodies. So theoretical background, institutional performance argued to depend not only on functions, on written rules, but also it depends on culture. Like North argues that it depends on unwritten rules of behavior, codes of conduct. The similar notion comes from Granovita, who highlights the salience of personal relations in operation of institutions. This is why a long tradition of political cultural studies have emphasized the culture as a determinant of economic and political progress. When we dig deeper and see Max Weber's Protestant ethic, Almond and Werwer's civic culture, Banfield's The Moral Basis of a Backward Society, all these, or Tocqueville's research in the Northern Europe, all highlighted the salience of the culture for the economic and political progress. But following 2-3 decades, other scholars claim that culture is not only crucial for economic and political progress, but state that culture is has a huge impact on institutions. Like in Putnam's study in making the democracy work in Italy, Newton and Norris or Fukuyama's research highlights the salience of culture for institutional performance. So culture, we refer how we define culture. We incorporate all these dimensions, 3 dimensions mentioned earlier. And for the social capital, we refer to Putnam because there are different interpretation of social capital. So we refer to it as a networks, norms, and trust between members of the society. And Putnam differentiates between 2 types of social capital, cognitive and structural. Cognitive in turns has 2 forms, bonding and bridging. I think that in examining the role of culture, Putnam, Newton, Norris, and Fukuyama neglected other dimensions of culture. In cultural theorists, Wildavsky, for example, offered other dimensions of culture based on group orientation and the number of imposed rules, which resulted in 4 types of culture. but result generated passive competition, hierarchy, and egalitarianism. But our main focus here will be on dimensions of the culture designed by cultural theorists. So what do we mean by group orientation? Individualistic or communitarian group orientation? Group orientation means when individuals in the society has desire to serve to the common goals, common benefits. It was mentioned in Banfield's study, like he calls this public spiritedness. He doesn't call it group orientation and communitarianism, but he calls it public spiritedness. It is also was mentioned in Almond and Verba's overarching study, the civic culture. So about the great number of imposed rules, it is also very important dimension of the culture, because based on this, societies differ. Some societies can be regarded as uncertainty avoidance culture. Some societies can accept uncertainties and be more innovative. So the imposed rules upon individuals are very important. This is why we would like to merge, apart from social capital, merge all these three dimensions of the culture and see the impact on institution. Institution, in our case, we have chosen public council. So moreover, my study is based on social capital thesis by Putnam, which states higher stock of social capital should lead to higher engagement in intermediate association. In intermediate association, citizens enhance their civic virtues, they demand better performing governance, institutions. This at the end leads to the better operation of institutions. In other words, to put it another way, it leads to a better effective institutions. So we would like to test it in our local context. Institutional performance of public councils. Apart from cultural explanations, there are other explanatory variables like governance environment, social political context, power relations, or for example, Knox and Janenova raises very interesting indicator like resources, deficiency of resources, time, money, and skills that also impact on the proper operation of public councils. Shalkenova, the Institute of Strategic Studies, raises concern about the imperfection of the law of the public council. This may lead to the arbitrary implementation of the law on the ground. So I draw the paper, the research draws on fieldwork pilot project on fieldwork carried out in ethnically homogeneous Mangistau region in August 2021, and it is expected to continue in ethnically heterogeneous regions of Kazakhstan. What do we mean by ethnically homogeneous Mangistau region, where the titular nation accounts above 90% of the population. So as mentioned earlier, ethnic homogeneity, heterogeneity impacts has an impact to the culture based on the literature. So we treat as an antecedent condition. And according to Putnam, ethnic homogeneity should lead to benign, it has a favorable impact on the culture, should be a higher level of social capital according to Putnam, which in turn should lead to better performing public council. So we will test and examine whether it is true in a local context. Culture, as mentioned earlier, three dimensions of the culture, measured by the metrics on dimensions of culture among 30 people in Mangistau region, and also data derived from semi-structured interviews. Performance of the public council was evaluated based on receptiveness and responsiveness of the public council, because according to the article number 3, the purpose of the public council is the expression of the civil society views. So it should serve as it should be responsive, it should be receptive to the NGO, to the general public, and serve as a bridge between the public and the state bodies. So we carried out archival work, correspondences, minutes, working plans, reports for 3 pre-COVID years. So to avoid the impact of COVID. Findings on dependent variable exhibit insufficient attention was paid to further tracking of citizen problems. In 2017, for example, there were above 180 appeals from the citizens, but only 5 further tracking. So this public council sends letters on behalf of citizens, but they never track what happens further. So very poor mechanism of feedback and further tracking. The number of public hearings has decreased over the years. Another is we witnessed frequent exchange of letters with state bodies and other quangos, but very absent of letters with NGOs. No, for example, these letters, exchanging letters with state bodies, public council invites experts, invites reporters, so in very frequent contact with the state body, but NGO members, general public are detached from the public council. And according to the semi-structured interviews, like on question on Bozhura, for example, an ecologist NGO, for example, mentions that they were not invited to the session, but they had a lot of input and they wanted to deliver their concerns. So this means that they are a bit, the public council is detached and isolated from the NGO and other civil society organizations. And it is ambiguity around how the working plan reports are generated because randomly or because working plans for hearing of civil servants or agenda should be generated based on, they should be receptive and based on concerns or messages from the NGOs and civil society organization, but it is ambiguity around it. So there is no updated information about public council members per se, almost unapproachable, no updated information on the website, despite the fact that I was trying to approach all 34 members, I could approach only 10 members, very low response rate, numerous of calls, numerous of visiting their offices, but only 10 members of the public council were ready for semi-structured interviews. So we, based on our findings, we found that based on receptiveness and responsiveness criteria, we came to the conclusion that it is in limited effectiveness. So we carried out research, archival work based on inbox letters, outbox letters, reports, minutes, and we generated information on their outputs and outcomes.
About 5 minutes left.
Findings on social capital. Despite the ethnic homogeneity, we found that there is a low degree of social capital on structural dimension. Yes, we found a high degree of social capital in cognitive dimension, bonding, particularly bonding, but moderate level of bridging. But despite this fact and ethnic homogeneity, there is very low level of structural dimension. This finding challenges the explanatory power of social capital thesis by Putnam. Another finding on imposed rules, at 3 levels, at family, at society, at state level, it showed that there is a high level of externally imposed rules. It means it is equal to Hofstede's uncertainty avoidance culture. This means public council members are in need of clear guidance. They cannot innovate. If you give freedom for them, they will innovate very arbitrarily. For example, reviewing of legal acts, 140 letters for reviewing legal acts, but non-single act feedback, official feedback was provided by public council members. So we witnessed that this uncertainty avoidance culture and imperfection of the law, no clear guidance, no clear instructions, they are contradicting to each other. It leads to them, so we are, this dimension of culture, uncertainty avoidance culture is impacting the performance, the operation of the public council. Group orientation, we revealed there is a high level of communitarianism at a family level only. At society, state level, it is very low. And when we cross-checked with other data generated from semi-structured interviews, we came to the same conclusion. Lack of communitarian worldview at society and at state level is a deterrence in proper functioning of the public council. Another alternative explanation of the limited effectiveness of the public council are lack of jurisdictional status and budget, governance environment, dominating role of the executive body, personality dependent feature. If the Akim is open-minded, then it will have a favorable impact. The operation of the public council depends on certain individuals, members of the public council. So conclusion is made that there is a limited effectiveness of the public council, and findings on our independent variables on social capital challenges the explanatory power of social capital thesis by Putnam. And findings shows that there is a high level of imposed rules on individuals at family, state, and society levels, but uncertainty and imperfection of the law and no soft regulation on the operation of the public council, and this and it is contradicting to each other, and it leads at the end to the ineffectiveness of the public council. Individuals are communitarian group oriented only at family level, so we refer to it at constrained communitarianism. Ethnically homogeneous Mangistau region exhibits the features of traditional civil society. It is moral trust in institutions, not based on performance, but if they trust the Akim, they will trust the institution. If they trust the members, they will trust the public council. So we refer to it at moral trust. Another is recruitment of public council members among notable peoples to serve as an intermediate between the civil society and the state. Another is constrained communitarianism, that people try to serve their common goals at family, at extended family, at clan level, but beyond the family and beyond the extended family level and clan level, people are not trying to serve common benefits. This is constraint to the proper functioning of the public council. So we faced some challenges during the field trip, particularly involving recruiting the respondents, low response rate, but next time we have a lesson that we need to approach them through executive body, maybe in order to increase sample size and sample size. Thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, I will be glad to answer to them. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Gulnur. So we had three presentations kind of nicely aligning with each other in terms of different levels of analysis, sort of more of a cross-country comparison case between countries, also national level, and also sort of more regional context within Kazakhstan. We are still waiting perhaps for the Vice Minister Orazbek to join us, but in the meantime, perhaps we can open the Q&A session. If there are any questions, so please.
Me.
Oh, please, Ricardo. Sorry, just very briefly, just a couple of words about the rules. So please either use your raise hand functionality or just type the question in the chat, and also perhaps just maybe introduce yourself maybe when you're asking a question. Thank you. Ricardo,
I'm a rule breaker. I don't do either. Thank you very much. I think it was a fabulous panel, and the three presentations were brilliant. But I have a little comment on each, and I have a question for each. The comment and I want to start with the second, the one about the electoral results. The presenter claimed that there was no change in the situation, had not really changed because people were expecting the most recent election will radically transform the party system, but in reality, the same party emerged as the winner. And my question is, well, we might wonder whether it would be a good thing that in a country where the political expertise has been concentrated in a political organization, there were a complete change in the ruling party. But let's leave that aside. We know from Sartori that party systems that have one relevant party, one party that remains in time over time, could be one party proper, like the former Soviet Union, could be hegemonic. There's one party, but some minor party are allowed to exist. And then you have the predominant party systems on which I've written a little bit. The point is, winning an election with 95% of the vote and winning with 71% of the vote is not the same thing. And so while it might not be sufficient for saying that there's been a full transition. It might be sufficient for saying that there has been some change at the party system level. And this brings me to Professor Knox's paper. I think it was a beautiful paper, but I think that these two countries are rather different. I would question actually the notion that they're both authoritarian, because clearly, or at least to me, Kyrgyzstan is a democratic system that is failing to become consolidated, and is failing to do so, and that's why he's experiencing all these troubles on the administrative side. On the other hand, well, not fully democratic or not democratic in a way a Western liberal democracy is democratic, Kazakhstan has taken several steps to start opening up the political system and liberalizing, election at the lower levels, the recognition of the role of opposition parties. And so actually, in one case, we have a system that first built the institution and then gradually try to open up, or that's my impression. And the other case, there was democratization without developing the state capacity. And that may be responsible for the results that you present and that I thought were fascinating. With regard to Gulnur, I am very happy to see that you're working on political culture, and I think you did a very good job, but there's at least an additional approach that you might want to pay attention to, and that has to do with the work of Ronald Inglehart, the notion that the culture has to do with post-material values. You use, and I like it, the Wildavsky, Mary Douglas mapping of cultural preferences along the two-dimension of breed and group. But at the same time, if you look at the work of Inglehart and Glezian, you can actually map societies depending on how secular or traditional they are on one axis, and depending on whether the priorities of the respondents are, self-realization or, more materialist climb. And so the point is, and so I think you should pay some attention to that. But more importantly, I think you should provide an explanation for why one of these frameworks work best. I raised the point about the Inglehart Lezian line of work, because some of that line of inquiry has actually produced several studies precisely on trust in political institutions and political systems. And so since that's something that features so prominently in your analysis, you cannot not pay attention to that. And on this point, I shut up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I will definitely be familiarized with this research.
Sure. Let's collect maybe a couple more questions, and then we give our presenters a chance to respond. Anyone in the audience, questions, please? Well, there is one question in the chat, question also for Gulnur. Do you think the involvement of citizens through public hearings on the draft of new laws, for example, is effective? And for that matter, what can, I guess, the government do in general to improve, whatever that means in this context, the political culture in Kazakhstan? So Gulnur, that's another question for you. Anybody in the audience has any questions, comments, maybe?
Should I answer to the question?
Hold on. Let's wait for maybe if anyone has a question in the audience. Anybody? No. Well, then perhaps I will use my moderator privilege and also ask a question to our participants. So, Colin, you were talking about very interesting comparison between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and it was interesting to see the sort of this structure where in Kyrgyzstan, by Freedom House ranking, there is, well, sort of more democracy, at least, some signs of it and civic engagement. Yet, interestingly enough, in terms of recruitment or performance of bureaucracy, it's there is less external recruitment, and there is, in general, it seems to be sort of more, I guess, less of merit-based sort of appointments, whereas in Kazakhstan, it's actually the opposite to some extent, right? So somewhat less elements of democracy, and yet, in general, it seems like performance is somewhat better. So I guess what broader conclusions can we draw out of it? That would be perhaps interesting. And also a question for Gulnur, perhaps. So you talked about ethnically homogeneous region in the western part of the country, and there are some, I guess, further implications, perhaps that I guess we could also maybe think about. So how is that? Because and I'm not that familiar with the context there, but it seems to me there's also a strong sense of regional identity there. And Western part of the country is distinct in many ways. So I guess is it really just the ethnicity that sort of defines the context, or is it more of a sort of we have this sort of oil and gas industry and we don't see that much of element benefiting from it because everything is sort of is taken away. Also, it seems to me that perhaps in general in there to some extent also the tribal identities matter. The whole Adai thing that's kind of important for a lot of people in the western part of the country. So is it really just ethnicity, or maybe there's more sort of cultural elements that really play a role? And if there are no other questions, perhaps we give our presenters a chance to respond. Perhaps I would suggest we go in the same order as presentations were given. So perhaps start with Professor Knox.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for very valuable feedback from both Professor Burkhanov and Professor Plitso. To Professor Plitso's observation questions, I think these are very pertinent observations about the extent to which these two countries are comparable. And I totally agree with you. If you look at some of the back data from Freedom House, they actually define Kyrgyzstan as quote unquote a defective democracy. So it's only more recently that Kyrgyzstan has changed categorization into an authoritarian regime. In fact, I have not questioned that. I have just simply taken that as, if you like, the divine truth. But I also think as well that there's a lag in the data here. So even though these data are 2020, they're probably been gathered, late end of 2019, early 2020. And I think that does not reflect some of the more recent things that have certainly happened in Kazakhstan, opening up the political system, more political parties, the election of hakims, generally parliament having a bigger role and so on. So I think there may well be a slight lag in terms of the categorization and quantification here. Maybe going forward, it would be useful to try and pick that up. In terms of Aziz's comment, yeah, I suppose to use that horrible American phrase, the takeaway for me in the research that we did was indeed the point that you made, Aziz, which is more democracy in a sense leads to less good performance. And in fact, I suppose in a sense, democratic credentials are not critical to bureaucratic performance, and that's kind of counterintuitive. So I suppose from that point of view, we would claim some novelty. Of course, academics are always very good at claiming they've done more than they really have. But my claim to fame here, such as it is that it is counterintuitive. Maybe it is a feature of the data lag that Ricardo refers to here. But I'm very grateful for these comments, and I think we should track this further as the data becomes more apparent. I mentioned to you that I was looking at another data set that actually includes some early references to 2021, where the COVID crisis kicked in, and it has actually impacted on some of these governance indicators significantly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Knox. So Professor Sheryazdanova, please have a chance to respond to questions.
Yes, thank you very much for your questions and for your interests. Actually, if I understand the Professor Ricardo correctly, it's a very common idea, kind of justification that inclusive party system with a dominant with one system can be justified in the period of transformation from totalitarian regime to democratic. I actually agree with this justification, but partly. I think that it can be justified till time when the effectiveness of economics will be dependent of politics. I mean that it will be effective till the moment when lack of political democracy can be obstacle for economical growth. I mean, sorry for my English, maybe my English is not, I could express my ideas in English appropriate, but I mean that this idea can be justified, but it can be justified till the moment when lack of democracy can lead to the obstacles to economical growth. So economical growth depends on politics. Lack of political reformation can be obstacle for economical growth. In that moment, no justification of authoritarian regime. Authoritarian regime should be effective way in transformation from totalitarian regime to democratic. It's called kind of authoritarian of development countries. It can be effective, but till some moment. So,
I totally agree with everything you said. My only point was that, at least it is my impression, and that was also the basis of my comment to you and to Professor Knox. The situation in your country now is not what it was before. I mean, the power of the presidents have decreased. You know, you start to have more elected officials. You know, the strength, the electoral strength of the ruling parties has decreased significantly. So I totally agree that we've not had a full transition, but I also think that the situation is very different. I think what's happening is that there's a guided liberalization, so to speak. You know where it will end, I don't know, but it's certainly true that, and the literature has spoken about it, that sometimes most famously Samuel Huntington in The Political Order and Changing Societies, that sometimes authoritarian regimes, precisely because they're able to build institutions and provide good governance, they're more effective than an unstable, feeble democratic regime in making economies perform. So you're absolutely spot on. But my point was on the other side, that I think that some change is underway. Now, the scope of this change for me is not yet clear, but you know, and I think, you know, I wanted just you to pay some attention to that in your paper, because I don't think you can equate the situation now to what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's all.
Thanks very much, Professor Sheryazdanova and Professor Beritsa. So let's give Gulnur a chance to respond to the questions. Gulnur, what is yours?
Thank you. The first question is from Samal, Ms. Bekmagambetova, regarding, do you think the involvement of citizens? I think it is ineffective. As I mentioned earlier, the number of public hearings is decreasing, and the public councils on the ground are involving civil society and the general public, not in an improper way. This is the first point. And another, at a macro level, if we will refer to O'Connor et al.'s article, O'Connor et al. And Professor Knox and Janenova mentioned in the article on open government, mentions that there is a online platform on open legislation that is open for all citizens of Kazakhstan to comment, critique, provide constructive feedback. But there was mentioned that there were 15,000 of drafts of legal acts. To those, only 415 posts from general public. This means that still people, Kazakh citizens in Kazakhstan, they have this low degree of criticism, low degree of political participation in terms of criticizing. Even if there is a provided opportunity, people are not involved in an efficient way. So, but public council per se, the public council that I have carried out the research is not effective in involving people in order to provide feedback to the legal acts. On the other hand, there is input letters. A majority of those input letters of the public council are devoted to the these legal acts. So the state bodies sent their legal acts to the public council to review. In 2017, there were 145 letters from state bodies. No single legal act was criticized, no officially. And when I first attracted, the response was, we use this telephone or WhatsApp messages to provide our feedback to the legal acts. So again, we see arbitrarily implementations. There is no strict guides, instructions, how to monitor, how to provide feedback to legal acts, and so on. Again, we find reasons from the culture. Another question is from Professor Burkhanov regarding the ethnic composition. When I researched, investigated ethnic diversity and the culture interrelationship. There were three theories: contact theory, conflict theory, and constrict theory. So we know that Kazakhstan is ethnically diverse, but we cannot treat it all Kazakhstan as ethnically diverse. Some regions are more diverse and some regions are less diverse, correct? Like in Kazalorda region, 95% almost are titular nations. So we cannot say it is an ethnically diverse culture. This is why we differentiated the regions of Kazakhstan into ethnically diverse region like East Kazakhstan or North Kazakhstan, where titular nation is a minority and Russians are majority, and South Kazlorda or South Kazakhstan, West Kazakhstan, because their population is mainly consisted of titular nation. So we wanted to differentiate ethnically when we differentiate ethnic diversity based on these numbers. If above 70% of ethnically titular nation means it is ethnically homogeneous region. If it is below 70%, the titular nation is below 70%, then we treat this region as ethnically diverse region. So we wanted to test Putnam's, particularly Putnam argued that if the region is ethnically diverse, then in a short term it leads to the lower trust between people, and he referred to it as a constrict theory. So on the ground, we found that people have a bonding trust people they know personally, and they trust people in general, but there is a very low associational membership, which we relate to the governance environment, social political context, and communist legacy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? So we have, I think, maybe, actually, I've been just notified that we have our fourth presenter. Unfortunately, it looks like the Vice Minister will not be able to join us, but we will have a presentation being presented by the Vice Minister's deputy. So perhaps we should give them the floor.
Professor, sorry, can I respond to Professor Pilitsa's feedback?
Hold on, we are giving our fourth presenter a chance to present.
Okay, later on then.
Yes. So, Madi, can you please maybe invite our fourth presenter?
Yes, he's a co-host.
Okay, so Mirat, Mr. Mirat. Okay, Mr. Mirat, are you with us? Apologize for this technical glitch. I'm just checking. Mr. Mirat, are you with us? Mr. Meirat, are you with us? Are you ready to present?
I think it should be unmuted.
Well, I'm not certain if Meirat is getting our messages. So perhaps while we're trying to fix that, maybe Norem, you have a quick question. Please go ahead. In the meantime, we're trying to figure out for the next presentation. Norem, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Sorry that my question later because I have maybe more problem with English than Gulmira Sheryazdanova, and I want to translate some words. First, I have two questions. First, a question to Gulmira Sheryazdanova about her survey and hearing government. So, in your survey, how many participants were in survey? And the second questions from Professor Colin Knox and other professors, we know that we have better situations than Kyrgyzstan, or we have one party, majority votes in one party. I think it's good because it's sustainable. It means sustainable government. But in other hand, we see a lot of problems. For example, in programs like hearing government, or when we related with brain drain or economic crisis. And so I think that one of the reason is a factor is incentives. So if we know that incentives matter, individual or social incentives. So my question related with institutions, how they will influence on incentives, and your suggestion to improve incentive of people to develop, say, our country, Kazakhstan, and the cost of this in long term. For example, not one day, or I mean, after 10 years, we should be, for example, in good economic, it will be, how to say, what kind of change it should be. So, thank you.
Okay, so while we're still trying to figure out the next participant, please, our presenters may respond. So Professor Sheryazdanova, maybe.
Thank you very much for your questions. Yes, I would like to note, it is really important note that the information survey actually, in my intended abstract, I noted that it was, I have get it from not my own resources, but resources from Dostum Satpayev, from his book, where he discussed the problem of lobby. Actually, I intended it in my abstract, that this information from my own survey, but from survey of Satpayev. But I think we can trust to this survey because you know, Satpayev is a very educated political scientist, and he asked many people from different spheres of Kazakhstani politics, from business, from among political scientists and among political journalists, from business, representative for business, and so on. That's why I'm just take this information and involve it in my presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Professor Sheryazdanova. Let's now, we have finally our fourth presenter, Mr. Mirat, on the behalf of Vice Minister, Mr. Askhat Orazbek, Vice Minister of Digital Development, Innovation, Aerospace Industry. Пожалуйста, вам слово для доклада.
Thank you very much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, so I'm speaking on behalf of the Vice Minister, Askhat Orazbek, and let me start with the. So our presentation is entitled "Modernization: Some Aspects of Modernization of Business Processes in the Public Sector of the Republic of Kazakhstan." So there are four authors, just collective work. It was a collective work, and the main speaker is, of course, Vice Minister Orazbek Askhat Ilyubavich. His ideas just shown here. So, so the relevance of research topic is just due to the fact that the conditions of our just modern reality just requires the new approaches and even transformations in public administration. So the public sector just nowadays switching to the use of tools used in the business environment, and one of these tools is engineering and the rethinking of benefits, values, and processes. So the the service sector in Kazakhstan just is considered, and it actually is an engine for growth of our country, and the efficiency of public sector becomes immensely important as it is the largest as well as deliverer of public services in our country. So there are some noise. So I'm sorry.
Please, everyone not presenting, please could you mute yourselves? Thank you.
Okay. So this problem of modernization of the public sector just becomes very acute during our just modern current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, when just rapid response to social problems and economic transformations so requires rapid political decisions. So the modern state should apply new approaches in the development of public policy. So under the traditional system, the functions, organization, and the main role of political decision-making belongs to state structures, to public sector, in particular, so the governments. And the realities of the exponential development of IT technologies, the vast sector of human activity, innovative management, and updating approaches are really necessary. So public policy requires new approaches in the development of the information society and the introduction of products of the fourth industrial revolution. So at the moment, the authorities, and especially Vice Minister Askhat Ilyubavich, just works on the implementation of the principles of public administration 3.0, taking into account all the above just mentioned conditions. So these conditions include the introduction of the principles of agile governments, along with the collegial method, the settlement of issues, so data exchange between private and public structures, intra-divisional just exchange of information in the public sector, as well as the expansion of the range of services and works of public-private partnership. So we just used such methods as functional review, case study, interviewed experts and public officials. So we used and also content analysis, syntactic analysis, and survey description of business processes. So to conduct a functional review, we use the methodology of conducting sectoral or departmental functional reviews of the activities of state bodies adopted by Order number 84 of the Minister of National Economy, the Republic of Kazakhstan. So as you can see, the content analysis was carried out in order to identify the duplicated functions. So the syntactic analysis of functions consisted in bringing the current formulations of the functions of the state body to a single standard for the formulation of the state function, according to the above methodology of the Minister of National Economy. So the standard is presented in two variants. First, the action and direct result, and then the recipient of direct result. And second, action and direct result and scope of application. We used also survey, sociological survey, and we just asked such questions as: how do your main business process influence political decision making? How do your main business processes affect the activities of business entities and representatives of the supervised sphere? So we just conducted survey among the 24 structural units of the ministry. So the third question: how do your main business processes affect the life of a resident of a country, non-resident of a country, citizens? So how do your business processes affect the activities and performance of official duties of the minister's employees and others? So in total, the interview presented with 10 questions, not so long. So the full list is given in the materials for publication. In the article, the survey description of business processes was carried out using BPMN and Bizagi modeler. So here is a chart of new organizational chart, which has to be more efficient, effective, appropriate for the just fulfilling the activities. So results and discussion. So the structure of the ministry adopted in August 2020 was adopted as a basis. So according to the structure, there are 10 branch auxiliary divisions for the implementation of functions and strategic goals, 5 committees and 5 departments. So as you can see here, just explanation. To support the activities of branch structural units, there are 10 structures, 8 departments, and 2 auxiliary departments. Here you can see 2 auxiliary departments, secretariat, and organizational chart. So the survey also showed that the top political leadership manages both processes and projects. So next slide. So we conducted content analysis, and as you can see, there is results of the total functions. So total committee functions, total total committee functions just consist of 249 functions and 169. So this corresponds to the standard of function formation, just in total 155, which do not comply with the standard of forming functions, 94. Duplicated among themselves, 32. As you can see, the functions of CAs are duplicated with the functions of departments, 17. So there are another table with similar numbers. So the functional review showed that the decree of the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan approved the position of the ministry, which includes, as you also already saw, so 249 functions in total. 14 branch structural divisions take part in the implementation of these functions. At the same time, 6 internal orders of the ministry on approval of the provisions of 20 structural divisions, including some decomposition of the functions of 14 branch auxiliary structural divisions and the establishment of the functions of 6 auxiliary departments and departments of the administrative block. So it's this sentence is very long, a little bit complicated to understand, but it was done like this. Were adopted to implement the above resolution. So analysis of the internal orders showed that the number of functions increased by 28 and amounting to, as you can see, it's doubled and tripled its number, 735 functions. The analysis of the relevance of the main business processes to the strategic goals of the ministries carried out. The analysis of target indicators showed that 19 target indicators were approved in the strategic plan of the ministry. In addition, 21 target indicators were approved in the various state documents, such Digital Kazakhstan, the 7th plan, the election program, Nurutan until 2025. So 12 documents, 12 target indicators, and the national plan for the implementation of the president messages. So in total, the ministry has been tasked with implementing 40 target indicators. In the survey of business processes, 30 main business processes are just observed, aimed at the implementation of 40 strategic target indicators. So next slide. As you can see, there is a chart, just a block scheme of functions, how they just ministry works with those functions. So there's an explanation. So results and discussion. The formation of business process maps and the analysis showed that 2 to 3 business processes are implemented in these departments. All other activities are aimed at developing regulatory legal acts, supporting business process managers, so some analytical documents, organizing meetings with senior management, so participating in the activities of departments that perform supporting business processes. So, for example, in one of the departments, 19 functions have been approved for the implementation of just one task, for which 12 functions, or 63%, are aimed at supporting managing business processes. 4 functions, 21%, as an implementation of basic business processes. 10% duplicates the activities of another department. In total, 66 functions are approved by the regulation. According to the approved regulation, the load on one employee is 3.6 functions. So 7% of functions, or 5 functions, are industry oriented. They are aimed at developing rules and methodologies for implementing industry specific business processes. So also the analysis of the functions of departments showed that the provisions of some departments' functions are duplicated within one task. One function is spelled out in several paragraphs in different words. So for example, in one of the departments, 15 functions are approved for the implementation of one task. 4 of them are actually implemented. The remaining 11 functions are duplication of the implemented ones. So according to the approved regulations, the load on one employee is 5 functions with actually 2.7 times least. The analysis of business processes showed that in general, the ministry implements 77 business processes, including main business processes, 30 or 38%, including industry A, 3 processes, industry B, 5 processes, industry C, 5 processes, industry D, 8 processes, industry F, 4 processes, industry G, and 5 processes. So managing business processes, 15 or 19%, where 6 or 32% of the business processes of the central office are duplicated by the committees. Supporting business process, 32 or 42%, including 72% business processes are production process of the committees. 9 or 28% of business processes of the central office are duplicated by committees. So 6 types of the activities fall under the structure of project activities. So taking into account the frequent reorganization and transformation of central state public bodies over the past 10 years, it can be assumed that many central state bodies of Kazakhstan have a similar situation. So many functions are duplicated by ministries or divisions and so on. One of the solutions to the issue of the application of supporting business processes is seen in bringing them into a single service center. So, as you can see, single service center can just solve the problems of duplicating in the public sector. So single source center will be will be responsible for accounting, then support of personnel records management, support of office work, language authentication, call center, monitoring legal expertise of normative legal acts, organizational visits and international business trips, and so on and so on. So this is the ministers novice. So I would like to read Klaus Schwab's opinion. He just said that the physical, digital, and biological worlds continue to converge. New technologies and platforms will increasingly enable citizens to engage with governments, voice their opinions, coordinate their efforts, and even circumvent the supervision of public authorities. So the aim of the ministry is not just to cut the duplication of the functions, and also according to the concept of agile government. So the ministry aims to just engage citizens into the work of the government. So there is one more chart here. As you can see, there are so many departments, committees that duplicate many functions, which can be cut and which can be which can consume less budget, so finance. Okay, conclusions. The authors of the article propose a new conceptual model of the structure of the state body, which provides the allocation of processes in a separate block. It is necessary to implement international quality management standards, determine the area of responsibility for decision-making for 1 or 2 senior management officials for management of the processes. So to organize project activities or project implementation, allocate a pool of certified project managers in a separate structure. Determine the area of responsibility for project management for the deputy first head, also certify. These transformations will create a basis for the management of internal business processes, information flows, and databases of the ministry. So it will also create opportunities to involve business and civil service, civil sector in the management of public projects through the direct participation. So this is all, and I'm sure that the Vice Minister would deliver it better than me. But thank you for your attention.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Miratomaro, for your very insightful and very informative presentation on the transformation of a ministry. And in the panel, we had a presentation on the cross-country comparison, region of Kazakhstan sort of insight, and then also national level. And it's very insightful to hear this very comprehensive review of how ministry operates and what kind of changes are being proposed. We have a few minutes for Q&A, perhaps maybe any questions from the audience to our presenter on the transformation of a ministry. Any questions in the audience, please? Raise your hand functionality or maybe type in the chat window. Any questions, please? If there are no questions, then maybe I will use my moderator privilege and ask a question to our fourth presenter that kind of aligns with the question from Anastasia Vorobyova in the chat window. So this transformation, it looks like it's a very comprehensive change. So I guess my question is, will we see, or will this experience of Ministry of Digital Development maybe extrapolated or maybe taken to other ministries? То есть другие министерства последуют ли похожей модели? Как вот не могли бы вы прокомментировать? Спасибо большое. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And they are just, this is a pilot project which are just working out in the ministry, and it of course will be just used by other ministries, other divisions. They are just pioneers in this sphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Norem, you have a hand sign. Is that the question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So thank you for presentation, and I have only one question. I forget. It was just in mind.
Okay.
1 second. For example, okay. When you said that it's only implemented now, or it's how to say, it's new approach. So when you decide what kind of approach to use, which countries or cases do you take? I mean, all ministry, and for example, pension fund, and how, what kind of model do you use to improve pension fund and other problems? For example, from Singapore or Chile, or other experience of other countries.
Okay, just so the question was on what kind of examples maybe government agencies look for inspiration. So when they need to come up with a change, what any maybe set of countries or a country that they kind of look at as a model for inspiration. If anyone could.
Yes, ministry just adopt the experience of many countries, and especially Singapore, which is considered to be one of the most effective in the world, and also Estonia. And I will deliver your question to the Vice Minister, and later maybe he will just give extended answer.
Okay, terrific. Maybe any last questions? Last question, because we are short on time and we have next session coming up in 10 minutes. So maybe final question or comment.
Can I make a very quick question?
Sure, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just a quick question. Thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned that upfront that part of this business process review was to have positive impact on citizens. I didn't hear any of that in the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Knox, thank you for your question. So this question or this issue is not shown in the presentation, unfortunately, because the Vice Minister would just would explain this himself. He just wanted to explain it himself.
Yep,
and they have a block scheme of the documents flow, and it will be cut because it's too long. And it's not shown because he should discuss it with the minister, with his senior officials, and then he would tell it by himself. That's why it's not shown here.
Great, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let me once again express my gratitude to all the participants and presenters for a very insightful, very comprehensive discussion. Without further ado, I will probably wrap up here so that we have a little bit of time before the next session. And you also have a link, a Zoom link to the next conference session, session 9, in the chat window.
Thank you.
Once again,
thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, everybody. See you all in the next session, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz.
Thank you.
Thank you.